Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this live virtual discussion on the LA wildfires and the challenges ahead and what the security industry's role will be in the recovery and rebuilding process. My name is Jeff Cole. I'm with the Security Industry Association, and today you'll hear an impactful and personal assessment of the tragedy and the devastating wildfires upon the surrounding communities and the opportunity for interested security industry stakeholders to discuss a potential role in their recovery efforts that will be ongoing. The Security Industry Association, SIA, is proud to have the support of some great partners. We want to thank the Electronic Security Association, ESA, the Monitoring Association, TMA, and our friends at the PSA Security Network. All four of these organizations recognize not only the traumatic impact of these wildfires, but we also recognize our opportunity to aid in the recovery process. So I also want to personally thank my longtime friend, Scott Goldfine at Elite Interactive Services. Scott connected me with his colleague, Michael, who was personally impacted very dramatically by the wildfires, and we're pleased to have Michael on today. This program is developed for information purposes, and our goal is to raise awareness of current recovery efforts that may involve security strategies. We will not be a platform for endorsing any specific services. Our goal is to learn and come together. We will present an overview of how the impacted communities have begun to organize and develop those rebuilding strategies. We're going to hopefully help you understand the current and near-term security and life safety needs, discuss how security may be part of the infrastructure and rebuilding strategy, and receive some information about the relevant first responder engagement and planning. Again, our goal here is to educate the industry and the public about the current recovery plan and begin a process for companies to contemplate potential involvement in these efforts. So I'm really pleased today. Let me move to our next slide to have some fantastic speakers on the program today. First and foremost, Michael Zadalov is the president of Elite Interactive Solutions. He's also the co-organizer of the Palisades Rebuild Group that has nearly, actually over 2,000 members now, including residents, businesses, contractors, officials, and agencies. So again, just really creating a lot of community there in the Palisades. We're also honored to have Keith Bushy on. He's a retired commander from the LAPD, deputy chief from the LAPD's West Bureau, and formerly with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, also a colonel from the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. So thanks on Keith. Mitch Tavera is also joining us. He is a Palisades Rebuild member. Notably, he's also a retired police chief, formerly with El Segundo Police Department. So thank you, Mitch. Joining us today also is Randy Johnson, co-president and CFO for Playa Capital Co. LLC. Randy, thanks for joining us. And we may be graced by Tom Stone from LAPD's Metro Division. So everyone, thanks for coming on today. As we get started, I'm going to hand it off to Michael to really tell his, I think, the meaningful story of what he's gone through and help set the stage for today's discussion. So Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the associations coming together and you joining us on this on today to talk about security. And I think that there's a lot of value that we can bring as an industry to a community that's just went through a pretty devastating situation. Just to start out, I wanted to do a little flyby and show you guys about where the city of the Palisades is for those that haven't seen it, and essentially the impact. I think it's fairly telling. The city of the Palisades is a suburb of Los Angeles. My family moved there in 2020, and we had my house, my parents' house, and all of them were destroyed in the fires. My house was located about here, right off of Sunset. My parents lived in the Tahitian Terrace community, which is entirely devastated. And what's unprecedented about this fire is that it not only took away homes people have built and spent years living and having memories, and it also essentially devastated an entire region of Los Angeles that is really in a bad spot. So our objective as a community is to rebuild. And after the fires, myself and several leaders in the community started to organize and try to figure out ways that we can really impact the community. There have been many different organizations within the Palisades, and including the community council that essentially organized in order to be the voice of the community. We are one of the groups, and we're looking forward to the political forces that may be, as well as the community forces, to come together and unify us in order for the rebuild effort to be done in a timely and a meaningful manner. Myself personally, I spent 7 months building my home. I've been in the Palisades, as I mentioned, for several years, and the devastation is entire. My family was one of the fortunate ones. We were able to quickly house in a nearby in the city. But what has become clear is that without intervention, public-private partnership between law enforcement and the community, it's going to be a significant challenge in bringing forward a rebuild. Now, I do run an electronic security company in the remote video monitoring space that is an expert in crime prevention, and we are a multiplier for law enforcement. And what you're going to hear today is some of the folks that are part of the law enforcement advisory board and essentially worked on cities and recovery plans, as we're going to be discussing today. So with that, I just wanted to hand it over back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for taking us on a virtual tour there. Um, I wonder if you could maybe speak just a little bit more about just the personal traumatic impact that this has, so to help us understand what the community is going through in this area.
Absolutely. So taking you back to
Oh, Michael, we locked you on mute.
apologies. So taking you back to January 7th, this was initially a pretty small fire that took place up in the hillside north of where I lived, just below the Highlands. And that fire was um, initially not given much thought because there's a lot of burns that happened in that geographical area. I believe there were two others. About 10 o'clock, my parents received notification that there is a fire approaching, and they saw the smoke overhead. My wife and I were still at work, and by the time we were able to leave, it was about noon. At that time, the fire was getting closer and closer to the community and starting to impact the different homes. So my child and my dog were evacuated to Santa Monica, and my wife and my family essentially rendezvoused at a relative's house. Meanwhile, the traffic in the Palisades and the chaos that was ongoing was pretty severe, to the point where there were vehicles stopped coming up and down Palisades Drive and Sunset. And what happened was that there wasn't really that much traffic control in helping people find ways out. So at about 6 p.m., I reached out to Mitch Tavera and another member of the law enforcement community and asked them for their help. We were able to connect to several religious institutions that eventually were able to guide the residents that were still stuck in their homes at about 6 p.m. and later to the exit routes. And we were able to provide resources to about 2 dozen families, mostly elderly, that needed assistance in getting out. They were all by about 9 o'clock, there was no more communication into the Palisades. The firefighters, as well as the law enforcement officers, were all really participating in the firefighting efforts. And after the fire subsided, um, people started to organize and really see the damage and the devastation that took place. One of the things that was very disappointing right after the fire was that while we did have closure of PCH and critical places, there were people that were able to get around that, and a lot of them didn't live in the community. Um, and my father himself, who lived in the Tahitian terraces right off PCH, was confronted by about a dozen people that were stealing immediately after the fire. They were taking advantage of this devastation and either hiking in through the mountainside after the fire subsided, or they were able to come in through the beach and do what they needed to do. About half of them were armed. So I know that there was an effort on law enforcement to catch them, but they can't catch what they can't see. And if there's nobody that's actually calling for law enforcement, well, that becomes a much, much scarier situation. And part of the mission that I have been on in my career within crime prevention has been to assist and be a false multiplier to law enforcement in order to mitigate these kinds of situations and bring forward the best technology that's available in order to substantiate, especially the challenges to bring value to the folks that are trying to fight crime. And given the devastation and the size of this thing, it's nearly an impossible task. Today, there's National Guard and law enforcement presence in the Palisades, and as you're going to hear from some of the folks that are on this call, traffic has become unmanageable, and also we're seeing that there isn't really that much control other than the outposts for folks trying to get in and out of the Palisades. There's been cases of contractors getting in through passes, and there've been folks that have been coming through for various reasons, not necessarily for looting, but control is definitely a challenge that we face. Now, on the rebuild side, as a resident of the Palisades and looking to rebuild several homes, it is going to be a significant challenge getting materials and labor into the Palisades for the simple reason that it's been incredibly difficult to begin with to be able to build in the Palisades due to its geographical location. But what makes it extra difficult is that there's only 30 ways in and out, and essentially two main transit points into the Palisades. And when there's going to be rebuild to this size, it's going to make it incredibly difficult for us to actually be able to get the people there. And the worst that could happen is once we are able to solve the logistical problems, how are we going to be able to balance that with the problems that theft is gonna be bringing forward? Without electronic security, I think this is really going to be, or at least a public-private partnership to be a false multiplier to law enforcement to allow them to actually take care of the bad guys. We're going to be unable to create a meaningful impact. So, while going through the permit process, I am absolutely listening in on the community and the forums and asking them what they need. And what is absolutely clear is that they don't know what they don't know as far as the electronic security side, the crime prevention side, and this is something that is going to come within the next 6 months as a major deficiency in the community. The other part about it is that we're not just talking about the Palisades and the rebuild. There's also the broader need for the future in emergency response to tackle the same problems that we've been faced with in the Palisades. This isn't the instant. This is not the only opportunity for us to come together as a community within the security community to find a process, purpose for us to come in and offer the rebuilders, the community itself, the solution, given the advance of technology and everything that we've learned in the security business. So that's essentially my experience, Jeff.
Michael, we're thankful that you could come on today and help lay out that groundwork. We're, we feel for you and the devastation that you and your family have experienced, and we applaud you for bringing the community together and also helping us bring this program together and all these great speakers from law enforcement and development to really help understand how we can alleviate some of the pain points of the community members and build a brighter future. As we kind of turn into the next stage, we're going to really kind of look at some perspectives from law enforcement. I got the pleasure in preparation for this program to get to know Keith Bushy a little bit. And the story he can tell you about the Palisades really puts a lot of light into what this area is impacting. So Keith, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. And it's an honor to be here. The Palisades is something that's very important to me personally. I'm a retired commander from the LAPD, and I've actually assigned my responsibility on two different occasions was to provide police services in the Palisades. I was the captain of West LA Division, and Palisades is part of that division. And then later, I was the commander in Operations West Bureau, which was the that portion of the city, the west side that included the Palisades. It was always a very difficult situation because there's only, from this LAPD standpoint, realistically, there's only one way in and one way out for quick access. That's you have to actually drive through the city of Santa Monica. And we've never been able to, even when we had a lot of manpower, we were never able to put more than one car in the Palisades. And one of my biggest challenges was just trying to keep that one car there. And when I was last assigned in that area, there were more men and women on the LAPD than there are today. So I want to make it clear that I don't speak for the LAPD anymore. I'm not there. I'm retired. But I doubt very seriously that anything I say is inconsistent with the challenges that are faced today. Uh, Access has always been a real problem there, and it's going to become a even greater problem with all the things that are going to be happening in the construction. The LAPD has a presence there now. I know that they're having a difficult maintaining even the presence they have, and that's going to be difficult to sustain. You know, when it comes to policing, there's probably three factors that you have to take into consideration to make a community safe. Number one is the police, of course. Number two is the community has to come together. And third, the role of the private sector. I don't think I can think of a situation where there's been a greater need or opportunity for the private sector than in policing the Palisades going forward with all the challenges that are there. One of the biggest challenges that all of us have on our plate, and everybody that has anything to do with the Palisades has on his plate, is leadership and coordination. And because there are so many people, mostly with good intentions, that want to do what they can in the Palisades, but bringing those together on the same sheet of music in a common direction to make that community better, safer, and more prosperous is going to be a real challenge. And as somebody that really loves the Palisades, I'm honored to be play whatever role I can play in achieving that.
Um, uh, all right. Well, Keith, I appreciate that introduction there. I'd like to call upon Mitch Tavera next. As mentioned, Mitch is the retired police chief from the city of El Segundo. He is also a Palisades Rebuild member. So, Mitch, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, it's my pleasure to be here today. When Michael asked me to take a look as part of this program today, I looked at it from being a commander in that area of what I would think would be some of the most challenging factors facing law enforcement coming into the Palisades area. And it's in my opinion that your traffic mitigation plan is going to be at best difficult. And in order to, this is where remote guarding can come in and really assist the police. We use this word all the time, this phrase force multiplier, but truly as a force multiplier by assisting them if in fact the Palisades are able to, one, get a construction zone site where the contractors can store their equipment, their vehicles, or whatever they need to continue the building in that area without having to leave. I understand from Keith, especially from Keith, and from Michael, that you could have a 2 to 3 hour drive from Pacific Coast Highway into the Palisades during rush hour traffic, which is absolutely horrific. So if we can get an area in there, we can help the police by remote guarding that location during the times and the schedule that the contractor so choose to prevent theft from that area. We can also assist with advising law enforcement people who are in the area during off hours when nobody's there, or security that happens to be there, that we can assist them in providing information that we now have people who have broached the remote guarding area. So I mean, I think that's really important. I think that if we can help in that general area of protection, traffic mitigation, site protection, that remote guarding elite can really be a factor in making the Palisades a safer area during this challenging time of building coming up.
Thank you. And again, part of our goal today is not to endorse any specific company on this, but to really build a overall solution across the industry on that. We also are pleased to have on today Randy Johnson from Playa Capital. Randy, is someone intimately involved in development. Can you talk about what you're seeing, what your perspective is on the future here?
Right. So just to put it in perspective, I retired from Brookfield. Your description of where I was at is maybe about 13 years old. So I've been a developer for the last 40 years. I spent 30 years developing Playa Vista in the West Side. So I'm very familiar with subcontractors not wanting to go to the lower West Side, much less the Palisades. So Steve Soboroff, who Keith, you may know, was a police commissioner for 10 years. Steve was named Chief Recovery Officer, and we're working on a number of things together, including the West LA VA litigation to try to get some housing for the homeless vets. So Karen called Steve we started on January 11th. And it was more of a 90-day assignment that what do we need to do to keep the city on the guardrails? Scoping wise, you've got roughly the Palisades has 23,000 residents, maybe a little over 7,000 homes, over 3,000 apartments and condos. And 5,000, basically 5,000 of those homes and condos burnt to the ground. And so it's a very difficult place to get to. The FEMA was out there pretty quick. They got the EPA to basically get most of the properties done with the hazmats portion of it, which what they learned was just those lithium batteries and power walls. I mean, it got to over 2,000 degrees. So when it gets to over 2,000 degrees, all kind of things melt, including the infrastructure, the conduit underneath the streets, sewer pipe, which is clay. Believe it or not, the water distribution pipes, the pressure in the system is fine. The water quality wasn't fine, but they're just about there on that. But the thing that's going on now is the Corps of Engineers has done a magnificent job of responding. They activated one prime contractor called ECC, and then ECC doesn't really do any self-perform. They basically sub everything out. And there's going to be 150,000 truck trips to take care of just the debris removal, which they separate the metals from the ash from the concrete, and then you've got the green waste, and then on the environmental contamination, they take 6 inches of dirt out, so many feet within the ash footprint. Still some issues with that. So the fire, not only took out the 5,000 homes, but it also took out a large amount of retail. Caruso Center is the largest there. They had their own little fire response team that did a good job. But they're rebuilding the few areas that did get hit right now. And then Anderson, Topa Equities, John Anderson from Anderson UCLA School. They had a good amount of retail. They got burnt, but they're actively doing the what we call the phase 2 stuff with debris removal. So debris removal will be going on between now and right now. What happens is they separate those 5 components. And then they go down to Mescal Canyon, which is, there's very few places you get in and out of there. And then from Temescal Canyon, they hang a right and go up to Canaan and go out to either Sunshine or some of the other approved dump sites. What the county is handling the rights of entry, and so the homeowner needs to fill those out. And as soon as they get filled out, they get over to the Corps of Engineers, who then assigns a team, notifies the homeowner that, hey guys, we're going to be doing your lot. Would you like to be there for it? And most homeowners do want to be there for it. And so that'll be going on till this fall. I'm guessing that about 80% of debris removal is done by this fall, and 20% will kind of go on a little bit longer. And so the truck trips, which right now are probably less than 75 a day, will get up to 800. You can just kind of do the math. And those are primarily like belly dumpers that hold about 11 cubic yards of waste. And there's at the base of Temescal Canyon, which is where they're staging. There is a rock crushing operation for those slabs, so that you're not bringing a lot of air in those trucks. You're filling up the belly dumpers. So from there, the city of Los Angeles and the county need to do the infrastructure. So, you first have to ask yourself the question, why did this happen to begin with? And what is the city doing to address water supply issues? I mean, there's a lot of residents who on January 7th, a lot of especially the Alphabet Streets, which is a section of the Palisades, about 1,300 homes, of which maybe 100 survived, that were on the roof at 3 a.m. with water hoses, that all of a sudden there's no water. And they had to evacuate at that point. So there is still a lot of anger over that, but the city needs to address the water supply issues. The city is going to have to work with the state on all those canyons that have all this beautiful chaparral back there. All that you need fire resistant planting back there. So there really needs to be a really hard effort on how do you harden the area. Nobody's going to be able to get insurance if you don't do it. The other thing is the insurance companies, beyond having to harden the home as far as in the rebuilding process, the insurance companies are going to have to be able to charge a risk adjusted rate. So premiums, could easily double or maybe even go north of that. But you need the capacity. Why would you ever want to rebuild if you can't get insurance? And so that needs to get dealt with. We're going to need Newsom's help on that, which I think he'll be there for. So far, he's been great. And the infrastructure. So, the infrastructure, you need to design it. You need to then try to get into a spot where you are clearing whole streets at a time. The debris removal is a little onesie twosie at this point because the rights of entry are coming in rather slowly. And that needs to speed up so the county is aware of it. And the guy at the county who's doing all that stuff is pretty good. So the next issue becomes, okay, now the infrastructure is in. I've got something to hook up to. I need to rebuild my home. So a lot of the lots in the Palisades are flat lots that you can almost do production housing. And then some are more akin to semi-custom, and some are it's just custom homes. And the price tag, on the custom home could easily be over $1,000 a foot. So if you did a 3,000 square foot home, you're looking at $3 million. For the most part, a lot of Palisadians, their insurance was Fair Plan. Fair Plan caps out at $3 million, but Fair Plan doesn't. It's a fire policy. You needed a a difference in condition type of policy to deal with everything else. So we're trying to create a mechanism so that it provides hope to those people that are severely underinsured. And even though 80% of the people in the Palisades want to come back to the Palisades, my guess is 25 to 35% will be able to come back. So it's going to be costly. And what we're trying to figure out is how do we drive those costs down? So starting with, the base camp, we need to get workers to stay in the Palisades, come on a Sunday night, stay till, stay to Friday afternoon. But we need to get a 60-hour work week out of you. And we don't want you on the streets. I cannot overemphasize, the logistics. I mean, if you got 5,000 homes down, if you said 20% a year, which is probably aggressive, that's 1,000 home. 1,000 home is 10 to 15,000 workers. So unlike a master plan community where, you've got one party that owns the land, here you've got 5,000 people that own it. So what happens is with this builder alliance is that the homeowner would go to the builders alliance, enter into a construction service agreement with them after they pick out, this is the elevation I like, this is the floor plan I like. And as you move down the curve to production, you'll have less choices. As you move up to custom, you'll have more choices. You can do what you want, but the cost will reflect that too. But we're going to need to have a base camp operation. It's very much like a Marshall Plan. How do we get this thing done? The military police that are out there right now, guys, they're going to be leaving pretty soon. So the strain on LAPD is going to only be, much more. They're going to have to rely on other type of security for that area. But the base camp is one thing. The batch plants for the concrete, every house probably takes about 7 for a 3,000 square foot home, about 7 trucks of concrete. So you're going to need to have, a batch plant in there. You're going to need to have a lumber yard in there, and you're going to have laydown yards because the material and all that stuff is going to have security around it. Very important. With the base camp ideas, it's going to have its own security issues, so we're going to have to deal with that too. But business as usual will not work in rebuilding. You're going to have, you're going to have to think out of the box on this one. It is, it's an unbelievable tragedy what's happened out there, but we're trying to help the people, give them alternatives. And instead of this thing going on for over 10 years, which could easily drag, the goal would be to get it done in 5 or 6 years, something like that. All right.
Andy, that's a great perspective. Bring that deep development expertise to this understanding on the infrastructure, rebuilding part of the process. How long might that take?
If the city gets engaged on it, the city right now is fearful on the infrastructure. FEMA typically covers 75 to 90% of the cost. Look what's happening to the VA. Look what's happening to DOD. Go through each department, and they're worried they may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets into the how are you going to fund that? What we call there's a horizontal gap, and that is just the difference between what FEMA reimburses and what the total cost is. How are you going to plug that gap? Is it going to be tax increment bonds? Is it land assessments? A number of ways to plug it. And I'll answer your question in a second. Typically design would, call it 6 months of design. and then building it, another 6 months. I'm hoping they are in a world where all they're doing is patching it. I'm hoping when it's done that whole right of way, which goes sidewalk to sidewalk, and the other part is you got to underground the overheads that are in the alphabet streets.
Mm.
You have to underground those things. I mean, those are a source of why this occurred in the fire. So it could, the 6 and 6, it could take something like that. But we're hoping the 6 is during this period that they're doing debris removal. Get the design done. And then the other thing is start bunching up the units when you get all the ROEs so that you can start doing streets at a time. So you go right after debris removal, open up that street. Let's get down to the joint trenches and do what we need to do.
That's a good vision for how to move this along. I mean, and when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about not only the water, the electric, but also the comms type.
Yeah, all the wet and
Yeah.
dry utilities that are in those trenches right now, and then so it's gas, it's electric, it's telecom, it's sewer, it's storm drains. Most of that, some of it's private, some of it's public. County does the storm drains. It's you got a little of everybody in there.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously on the communications infrastructure, that affects the security communities, right? I mean, so many technical systems, and even law enforcement's ability to use it for communications as well. I think at this point, let's kind of open it up among the panel. Further thoughts in areas that we can explore as we talk about this rebuilding process.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate everything you had to say, Randy. I think it's as a homeowner, those options are incredibly valuable. As a security professional, the challenges with entry and getting those trucks and people in the right way is a major challenge. And I certainly would love to hear from our law enforcement what their thoughts are, where we can essentially help the initiatives that you're discussing become reality. So I certainly hope that the electronic security community can come together with a plan that we can present for all the different facets that you were so clear on expressing. But I would certainly love to hear from Mitch and from Keith what their thoughts are. Keith, you're on mute.
Forgive me. I've been listening carefully, and Randy, what a great assessment you provided. You obviously have given an awful lot of thought to it. And please give my best to Steve Soboroff. You guys have your work cut out for you. There's a couple of thoughts that occurred to me. Number one is that not everybody in the city and not all the stakeholders are on the same sheet of music. And there's a lot of reasons why people get along and reasons why people don't. If there's ever been an opportunity for leadership, this is that opportunity for all the stakeholders to roll up their sleeves to the extent that they can, put some of the political things beside them and try to get on the same sheet of music. That is going to be a very, very difficult task. But I look at the different people that are involved, and I think those people have the ability to do that. That's going to be essential. And this is going to be a 24-hour operation. There's no way. All you have to do is do the math, as Randy Johnson said. Just do the math, and you realize that there's going to be trucks going in and out and disrupting everything between the city of Los Angeles and every place else and the Palisades 24 hours a day. That's going to be a massive operation, and it's going to take real leadership that'll involve, once again, that partnership between the community, the police department, and the public sector to coordinate that. My hat's off to you.
Keith, what I will tell you is that the community groups in the Palisades are getting highly organized, and they've been wonderful so far. But and we also were blessed that UCLA, USC, and ULI, the Urban Land Institute, came forward with a report. I'd be happy to share it with you guys. It's 172 pages, but it deals with the work streams. It deals with what were the lessons learned from the prior wildfires that occurred in California. Because all that's happening right now, guys, is that the frequency of these wildfires have doubled in the last 5 years, and the amount of acreage has quadrupled. And so the severity and the frequency have, this is not going away anywhere. There's 245,000 homes in the Los Angeles area that are part of this wildlife urban interface area where, it's special risk, and they're prone to wildfires. So it's it's encouraging to see the community groups. I think it's good. The political side of it is freaking ugly. It's just ugly. I wish I could say, oh my God, but it's tough. A lot of everyone kind of sniping at each other, type of things. But hopefully they'll, and I agree with you. It'll take leadership, and I'm hoping we get there. A lot of the stuff we don't need them for, and some of the stuff we need them for, like the infrastructure, absolutely need them for. But the insurance aspect, they've been good so far with the permit streamlining. How do you process? DBS right now is 20% understaffed. How are they gonna deal with 5,000 of these? It's we already had a housing issue, guys, and so this is the city's coming up with more of a self-certification for the permitting, but not the inspection. But that still has to run its course through the city. It's not an ordinance at this point. So I think we're trying to get there. A lot of people, a lot of good people, but yeah, I'm not one for politics. That's what do you need to do to get it done? Here's the goal. How do you get there? Type of thing. Yeah.
That's a great approach. I think I want to raise as your moderator just a question, and maybe particularly for Keith and Mitch is, with your law enforcement backgrounds, what are the challenges that kind of you would be going through of receiving feedback from a community when you have just, multiple community councils? How do you balance the priorities? Because I'm assuming that you might hear different priorities from different community councils. How do you approach that?
Well, let me take a shot at that. One of the biggest challenges is determining the true weight and the true influence of people who step forward and indicate that they're a key player. Because there's some people that have a big following behind them, and there's other people that have a fancy letterhead and speak well and they're articulate, but they really only speak for the person that's on their right or on their left. For instance, take a community council. Somebody will come forward and say, well, I represent this community. And sometimes they don't represent any better than their neighbor on the right and on the left. And there's other people that have an enormous following. One of the key issues that has always been a key issue in Los Angeles has been the council district. Because Los Angeles, the council person has a tremendous amount of influence. So the good news I have heard from Randy Johnson is all these community groups are coming together and they're got some pretty good leadership. But the question is, when all these community groups that have that leadership, how do they come together under one roof? And that's going to be the big issue. I would say one of the biggest issues is determining who really has a following, who really has something to provide, because the world is full of people who say they're generals that are not always generals.
So let me respond to that. In Santa Rosa had that terrible fire, but they're one of the few communities that got rebuilt fairly quickly. So the people in the Palisades contacted the people that were doing that, and they found out this way that, hey, we need to break this up between neighborhood representatives who would then have block captains report to them. And then the block captains would report to everyone on their block. The information infrastructure as how do you communicate with that impacted homeowner has been horrific. And it needs to be the first thing that has to happen is how do you get accurate information to the impacted homeowners? And so the county and the city have developed some pretty good websites, and as has the Corps of Engineers, that give you a lot of really good information to get to. But as far as encouraging people to, go pull your permits right now. Well, shit, what are you going to pull your permits for if you have nothing to hook up to, type of thing. I mean, we need to be aware of what that overall schedule is. Everyone needs to be on the same page. But as far as, yeah, the politics, I wish it was clear cut.
Well, every time something goes from one person to another, it loses some of the translation, and there's more room for misunderstanding. And I think what you just described, Randy, when there's a central source of information that's pushed that information down, there's probably going to be less distortion as it goes from one level to another.
Well, Michael, how do you view it as an impacted homeowner? The communication.
So as far as communication, that's the biggest challenge. The key for me in this whole rebuild process was, number one, understanding what the options are for me and my family, and having that kind of be the guidance. I think there are people of means in the Palisades, and they're going to do whatever it is that they do as fast as possible. There's no way around it. The challenge is we have a lot of renters, we have a lot of elderly folks, we have a lot of folks that really do need that help. And that area needs support. And it's a different kind of support than the majority of the Palisades that is, basically in that 40 to 65 year group, because they have the ability and the means. I think for me personally, the challenge is not necessarily getting out and doing the plan set, but it's knowing what happens next, because the cost of the plan set versus the delay is the most costly portion of this, not the fees.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if we had better organization within the community council and the support of the population to one central organization, not these activist groups, we would see a lot better communication to the higher ups. And I think my biggest challenge has been that the organizations that are designed for it are being replaced by grassroots movements, and that's okay. But without the political backing and the community, the elected officials backing it, I think it's a really big challenge, and communication is going to be the biggest bottleneck for the initiatives that you're describing, Randy. I would love for you to come in and help build my house. I certainly would love that. And I think the community would also. It's just the logistics and getting that message through has been the challenge, because even within the activist groups, there's politics and infighting.
Yeah, and all it takes, guys, is to be with some of the 80-year-old women out there who've lived in the house their whole life, were born in the house, they're underinsured, and they're going, what am I to do? And those are the people you want to help. And yeah, the Palisades is not a lot of people are going to cry, oh my gosh, a $60 million home burned down, type of thing. I mean, Altadena, different story. I mean, you've got a lot of people that are really needing help, there. But it's there. Not everyone in the Palisades is bucks up. There are some people that really need the help, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I certainly would hope that the community council, which is the group that is representative of the class of folks that you, Randy, are trying to help, brings organization and messaging. They should be the ones that talk about law enforcement. They should be the ones talking about rebuild efforts and hosting events. I think that the onus needs to be on the community, elected officials, that are then going to interface with other elected officials to make change happen. That's how our country is supposed to run.
I just don't know, Keith. I don't know what's going to happen after, military police pull out, because they're pulling out sometime in the next 60 days.
Right.
And so,
yeah, that Randy, you make the great point there is, if you look at law enforcement, you asked Jeff what law enforcement can do, is we're supposed to provide protection and safety for the area, correct? That's your main job. And if you have nobody to send, what is LAPD going to do? They need to, I'm sure they're looking at it, and I'm not sure if they can get mutual aid from surrounding agencies to assist them, if they can ask for an extension from the military police, if they can work with the sheriffs, that there's a great many things they can do. I think outreach right now with the community is a big deal for the police departments, and having community meetings to discuss these issues so they understand what law enforcement is going to be pressed with and how they can help them. And I think that's a huge deal. Keith talks about, finding your community leaders. That community council person has to be on board with everything. You got to involve her. Is it her? Am I correct, Keith? It is a her. You got to involve her and have her responsible, because ultimately she carries the weight of the council. And that's a big deal.
I had said earlier that that protecting the community is a partnership that includes the private sector. Again, I don't speak for the police department, but just looking at the manpower needs that are going to continue to exist in the Palisades, where there's traffic, security, and all that, I think it would be a Herculean task to dig up that manpower, even on the basis of overtime. There's going to come a time when the manpower cannot be sustained, and what a terrific need for the private sector to be involved.
Yeah. Randy, correct me, when are the Olympics coming?
28.
When will construction be done?
Realistically, guys, I think it's probably 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
And then you have World Cup next year, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you have a lot of events coming to LA. They're going to be manpower intensive. You have a limited number of resources, and that is something that that's got. I'm sure they are. LAPD is a very innovative organization. They have to look at it. How are they going to staff this?
How are we going to staff it? And are we really going to be ready for the Olympics? I mean, when we saw the Paris Olympics and we saw the cyclists finish underneath the Eiffel Tower, we want LA to look great, right? I mean, we want to be proud of it. And there's a lot of issues. We still have 60,000 homeless. We have, there's Palisades won't be done by then, guys. It won't, but the retail will be back up for a good chunk of it. And a lot of those homes will be rebuilt, but it's still going to be in construction. It just is, and so got a lot of issues, guys, and it takes a lot of dough, and this administration, I don't think we're going to be seeing too much,
But to tackle one problem at a time, I think that this is an unprecedented time. And I know from my experience, my personal experience in the security space, we have the technology that's there. And Jeff, if you want to add, but I think that there is definitely an unprecedented opportunity in this call being the first of many that could bring efficiencies to make it happen. So I really am very hopeful that we can provide one element of the solution, at least mitigation of traffic, enforcement of laws, supplementing law enforcement when we are understaffed. We could take on that challenge. Jeff, what do you?
It's funny. Just last week I was in New York at a major construction expo, and talking about the security, looking really at the security of major commercial construction, and reflecting on it, and obviously not being from your area, but reflecting on it. I think I'm hearing huge shortage of manpower on both the safety, security, law enforcement, as well as the construction side. We're going to absolutely need to leverage whatever labor we can secure for this, as well as any available technologies, to make us more efficient from a logistical standpoint, as well as certainly from a security standpoint. So, for the security industry community that's listening in, I'd encourage you to reach out. I'd reach out directly to Michael. I mean, I think he's boots on the ground. He's experienced it. He knows, the community there, and recommend it. As we kind of get to the last few minutes of the program, I want to reflect one comment that came in from a listener to our live stream. Thank you for noting this. They noted that, just the team members, law enforcement, military who are on the front lines, feel a little forgotten. So we want to make sure we recognize them and the incredible work that they've done and continue to do to keep the area safe. It's challenged, and I know this individual asked about extra assistance for skills and technologies. We can certainly don't know exactly what those lacking areas are, but we certainly hope that we can provide those solutions. As we wrap up, I want to ask each of our panelists to reflect upon one or two most important things that we can all take as takeaways from this discussion. Michael, can I start with you on that?
Yeah, I think the takeaways are that we got problems and we got big ones. And I think that there is hope that we are going to be successful. And all of that is really dependent on the unity of the community, because they have to ask for the help and they have to be informed on the help, right? The electronic security world has incorporated different facets, from the integration side to the guarding side to the traffic control side, and we are able to come in and provide a unique perspective on a revolutionary new way to do the same problem, to solve a problem that we've had for decades, right? How can we do this better? There are political challenges. We need to be able to work with the community in order to get law enforcement support, because that has to be hand in hand. For me, the biggest challenge as a community activist and as a person familiar with it is everybody's got to focus on one problem at a time. We can't, in our company, we say, don't boil the ocean. In this case, one solution is better than a bunch of questions. So if we know that this has been done one way, needs to be done a different way, let's bring that to the forefront. I think as a follow-up, I'd love to see that there's conversations amongst the industries, and essentially based on the experience of the folks that we have gathered here today, we can provide something that means more than just talk. We need to have action. So that's really the follow-up that I would have to this.
Yeah, good takeaways. Go round clockwise. Keith.
Yes. Put on my other hat for a moment. After I left LAPD, I went out to the county of San Bernardino, where I was a chief on the sheriff's department. And we had the opportunity out there to deal with earthquakes, some pretty catastrophic earthquakes. And also I was the IC, incident command, on the massive wildfires out there, the Grand Prix and the old fires. And also, let me put on my military hat for a moment. I'm a retired colonel from the Marine Corps Reserve, where I've dealt with military support to civil authorities. So I've got a little bit of a background, but I think that background is enhanced by an awful lot of scar tissue. The one thing that I would like to emphasize is that it's absolutely essential to make sure once those key people have been identified, that those key people, not placebos, not representatives, but those key people come together on a regular basis to sit down, to roll up their sleeves and determine a common path forward. And it's not something where, well, I'm going to send somebody and go to the meeting and he'll bring that information back. We need key people sitting around a table that are able to make decisions collectively to move forward.
Great feedback there. Mitch, thoughts?
One thing I would just reiterate with Mr. Johnson said, I believe the state of California has enough wildfires that we've had some terrific disasters that we can learn from those communities. And that's the outreach that we need to do to find out what works, what doesn't work, and even bring those people down so they can assist in the building or rebuilding of this location. And that includes their law enforcement officials or public safety officials or whatever it is. Someone's done this before. And we know that up north, they lost a tremendous amount of people. I think it's the greatest loss of life of wildfires in our nation. And so we have a template. There has to be successes. We need, not us necessarily, but the government, we need to reach out. And I believe, as Michael said, I do believe the electronic remote guarding companies can assist in any way, shape, or possible in assisting in that, because there's a lot to learn, and for us not to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Good. And Randy, from the development leadership world.
You wanted me just to say,
Just your takeaways, key takeaways, things you would impart to folks as they leave this live stream program.
It's going to take time. It's going to take, as Keith said, real leadership, hard decisions, but you're going to have people in the room who can make decisions. What you don't need is, we're going to study this, or we're going to study that. I mean, you need people who can react fairly quickly as if it was a private enterprise, type of thing. But it's all doable, guys. It is, the people there need the help. We need to help. We need to figure it out. And but it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge.
Great. And as we wrap up, I know a lot of folks are interested in helping out, contributing. Michael, if they wanted to reach out to you, are you okay with sharing any information on how to contact you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Feel free to go do so. So
Okay, after the
yeah. So again, Michael's president of Elite Interactive Services. I guess the first start, find him on the web. His firm on the web. Maybe reach out that way might be the best way, rather than putting any PII out here on a live stream program. So
yes, sir.
yeah, good. Well, thank you all for this this important discussion. Honored to have you. Honored to host this conversation. So thank you again, and all of our, from all the security industry, from our, from SIA, from ESA, TMA, and PSA, all our partners on this program. We are here for the community, and let us know how we can help.